I'm Melina. How are you? Welcome to our decision clinic. How are you feeling?
Hello, Ben. I'm feeling quite well. I don't know how it's going to be at the process. Maybe I'll ask for some advice from you as well, but I'm feeling well for the moment. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. Yes. Very busy these days, but I'm really looking forward to this, and I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. And we'll just see. We'll see how it goes. But I do think that there are lots of people out there who are interested in how to make better decisions. And what I think we'll be able to do is show some people, because I think, one of the things I was thinking about is whenever we have a decision dilemma, we sometimes think that no one has this right now, and no one ever has had a similar decision that they are working on. And that's of course not true, but it can feel daunting and even lonely at times when we have a big decision, even if it's an exciting decision to make. And so I think sharing, even if some of the decisions are a little bit different, the context is a little bit different, I think it's good to share that there are lots of similarities as well. So I'm excited. I think we'll be able to help each other. I really like your perspective on decision making, and I learn a lot from you. And I think that just being able to talk about some of the things that we are going to dive into will be helpful to people. At least that's my hope for this. So how about you?
Thank you for inviting me to do this decision clinic, because it was clearly your idea. And I really got excited when you talked about it. Because I think for both of us, at the end of the day, that's why we do this, right? I mean, we try to improve our own decision making and also help others. And, like you said, it's hard to, even, put yourself to describe the decision or the problem that you're going through. And I mean, how can other people relate? They don't know my specific situation. I don't want to be influenced by other people. But exactly, we're not here to do that. I mean, we're here to talk about the more systematic ways in which, a good decision-making process should be like. And I'm also curious and excited to hear from you, because we come from different fields, different experiences. And although we meet at the core of good decision making, I'm also interested to hear how you express your insights and your advice. So,
likewise. And I think you made a couple of good points. We're not here to say, for example, if someone has a decision to make about an investment, we're not here to say, well, we think that the interest rate is going to go up and therefore you should do this. And I really like the name of your firm, your Meta Decisions. I like that word meta, not in the Facebook sense, but what we're talking about is a meta skill, in that we're helping people take a step back, zoom out, and ask some kind of fundamental questions we often miss. And these are meta skills that make all the other things we do just easier, better, more effective, etc. So I really like that. I really like that word, and how
it feels even more important now with technology, right? I mean, you have artificial intelligence taking over different aspects of our work, but being able to think how you think, decide how you decide, which part of AI do you use and which ones to not, how do you use it? I mean, that's something that will distinguish you from competition for sure.
The other thing I was thinking about as you were talking there is that what we're talking about as well is a practice. And so it's always good to hone our skills, because it's not like you go to the gym. I know you play basketball. It's not like you learn how to shoot a free throw and then all of a sudden we always know. If it's practice, it's repetition. So this is good. This is really good stuff for all of us. Any other thoughts before we dive into the first one?
I was gonna say, you're right on. It was a very interesting exercise for me as well to go through the problems, the situations that we received. And hopefully, I mean, we'll make some good points, some helpful points, for the people who submitted them and more general. So yeah, let's jump right to it.
Okay. So this first one, we're going to go through three, by the way. So the first one it comes to us from Jordan, and I'll just read it out, and I'll offer maybe a thought or two, and then I'll kick it over to you, and then we can just kind of feed off of each other and see how we can help Jordan. But so Jordan writes, my partner is finishing their PhD in Toronto and is choosing to do a postdoc in either Montreal, New York, or California. Their end goal is becoming a professor, which typically requires one or more postdoc positions, 2+ years. Professional criteria: 1, opportunity to publish high impact research. 2, opportunity to niche or brand as a scientist. 3, USA postdoc is more, in quotes, valuable than Canadian. Then personal criteria: 1, cost of living. 2, quality of life as a queer person of color. 3, distance from Ontario family. 4, visa for their self-employed common law but not yet married partner, i.e. me. The specific universities under consideration are McGill, which is in Montreal, by the way, New York University, Columbia, also in New York, and the University of California, Santa Barbara. So really interesting one. The first reaction is like, wow, they've got their criteria already nicely laid out, which I really like. So they're obviously putting a fair bit of thought and trying to balance the professional versus personal. There's also, there are two people involved here as well, and so that creates an interesting dynamic. Are they deciding together? These kinds of things. So that's a first impression. And the second impression that I got was, geez, this is a nice problem to have, right? That it's tough, but these are all like really good options. And sometimes we over optimize around some really, really good options, trying to finally, pick the fine detail that's going to, decide it one way or the other. And so that's also interesting. And sometimes in other contexts, people, organizations try to maybe over optimize and try to find the minute detail that's going to swing it. And sometimes it's useful just to step back and say, actually, these are all like really, really interesting options. Those are just initial thoughts, but I'm curious what you think when you first looked at this.
Yeah, well, exactly. Building on what you said, I thought, like, first of all, congratulations. I mean, this is a great, great situation to be in, and it's a good dilemma to have. But, having said that, it is a big decision, because, I mean, it's about the future. Plus, it's a 2-year commitment. Whatever you decide, it affects personal life. It is a big decision. So, it's very nice to see people considering this, very seriously, despite all the options being like you said, I mean, there are top schools there. Well, generally, I think the way people would approach that is perhaps with a pros and cons list. Like, okay, taking each university, what's good about this, what's bad. One point I would say is that, pros and cons, they are great for the high level thinking. And of course, there are different versions of them. But in general, what I don't like about them is that you get to rate each option based on slightly different criteria. It doesn't allow you to be uniform. It doesn't allow you to put, the options side by side and evaluate them all at once. that would be the weight and rate table, right, Ben? I mean, that would, or the decision matrix, as most people, know, call it or not, but it's quite a popular tool, useful, but I think between the two of us, we have a few things to say about, I mean, when we use this tool. So first of all, it's great. It's a great tool for, comparing different options, since you have the options and you have your criteria. But, shall we start saying a few things about you to be careful? You want to start or should I start?
Sure. I'll start and we can riff off of each other. One, I do have a high level framework. It's called focus. And there's, to me, the framing, the F stands for framing. And that's really important. Because it's all about, what do you want? And so immediately when you start thinking about, something like the weight and rate tool, we're trying to adjudicate between values, which is, very linear, right? And so, they mention lots of things, proximity to family, there's a relationship dynamic, there's some stuff about, the future, the value of one school versus another school. And so there's a lot of stuff to adjudicate. How do you attach weights to all of these? What's more important than something else? And, that's very, very hard to do. And so I do think that's very important to just kind of think about values and, what's important in one's life. But this is not a linear process. So what my advice would be, great to do something like set out your criteria, how much this stuff is important, but it's the process that's more important than the outcome of doing something like that, because you will ask certain questions that, maybe you discover something about yourself, about career ambitions, about one's relationship. How important is proximity to family? And you might discover that's really important, or you might discover actually, there are lots of ways to deal with that. So I would start by, having a method or having methods. Weight and rate tools really good. I would also say, kind of listing out or trying to think about one's sort of values, personal value set, and go through some kind of a structured process. But it's the process that's really important, not necessarily the outcome. So if one option gives you, 10.5 and the other one says 10.3, that's not the point. The point is asking the right kinds of questions and discovering something about oneself, and preferences.
Yeah. Exactly. Building exactly on what you are saying, the criteria that are set, based on the values, that's a key part. And it's kind of tricky, many times because, one, we can be influenced by, what looks good to others or what others expect from us in terms of, the weight that we put on each criterion. But also another factor, and I had personal experience with this, is the hot-cold empathy gap. So we're basically deciding now for our future selves, and we're deciding now from the comfort of our office or sofa or home, a loving environment. But once we are there in that foreign environment, things are going to look a bit different. At least in the beginning, for a few months, until we settle. So it's important to take that into consideration as well. Have empathy for your future self. Try to visualize it. Mm-hmm. So, that could or could not affect the criteria that you have listed, but it's a good factor, to take into account for because once you're there, once you've made the decision, you want things to go well. It's important to be as, prepared for that as you can. And perhaps another thing is that sometimes we pick criteria that are sort of easy to evaluate and ignore other criteria that are important, but okay, we don't know how to judge that. Well, either between the different universities or other options. But it's important to have those as well, even if it's harder to evaluate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to ask you about the last point that you said. That's really, really important. So even if the weight and rate tool, you say, even if it gives you, like, you do the calculations, you multiply, you add the scores, and one of the options has like 10 or 20 points more than the other. Right? How would you?
Yeah,
how would you look at that? Yeah,
I can talk about how I do it, but that may not be the right way to necessarily approach. But I think it's valuable to, sometimes when we do these kinds of things, we kind of know what our desired, or like our preferred outcome, what that looks like. Having all of these wonderful things, and it's actually quite easy to kind of fudge scores and dilute ourselves into, just nudging a preferred option into one higher than another. And I think we do that, and maybe subconsciously, but I like so I'm not sure if you have ever come across this quote from, so this is Rory Sutherland, who I'm going to have on my show soon, but he talks about the ancient Persians when they were making decisions. So big monumental decisions. And he says that they would debate it rationally. So, i.e. sober. And then they would debate the same thing, but drunk. And it's only if the two conclusions coincide that they go ahead with this. Now, I'm not saying get drunk. But I am saying, pay attention.
No, I love it. I love it. I love what you're saying.
Yeah. Pay attention to what's coming up, feeling wise. So I think there should be some kind of structure, rational structure, but also pay attention to what you're, so let's assume one of the last criteria, a visa for their self-employed self, right? In the US, presuming this person, he is Canadian, and they can't find a job or the visa process is taking far too long. Well, what would that look like or feel like? And maybe the answer is that's okay. Or maybe the answer is, that wouldn't be great. Or maybe something else about cost of living or quality of life, or there might be a feeling. And we know that we shouldn't necessarily make decisions based on intuition, but we should be listening to it. And so there may be some things that come up that you discover about yourself through the process. And I think it's really important to at least note those down and to think about what they mean. And that might sway. You might do the calculations and it comes up that all of them are great options, are all really, really close, but there might be one thing that might be based on a value or something that's quite important that might sway it. So I would say pay very, very close attention to that side as well. And there is also, there's a relationship dynamic too. And I would say pay close attention, because if I was happy in my professional life, but my partner was miserable, then that would affect me, even though I might be on my way to becoming, a Nobel laureate or something. Or I'm really, really enjoying what I'm doing. That might be challenging. That would be challenging. So I would.
Yeah.
It's just have a kind of rational, logical kind of way, but also then think about all of the things that they're very linked to one's values, and don't be too have a systematic way, but this is going to be nonlinear. You're going to go back and forth. You're going to discover things. You might adjust the criteria. You might, and that's okay. But consider both angles to this.
Yeah. Basically, purposefully, intentionally, you should come back to it at different points in time. Like And it's good once, I mean, the sooner that you start doing an exercise or a process like a weight and rate tool or, the full focus process, Ben's process, the sooner you do it, then your mind will, have time to work through the kinks and, you adjust things or whatever. And perhaps it's not a good advice to say to people, get drunk and see how you think about it. But it's important to think about it when you're in different emotional states, like you said. Yeah. So it's an excellent point.
I like that. The other thought I had was, thank you for mentioning my focus tool. I think they've done a really good job of setting out options, which is what the O is. The part that's really interesting to me is also so I call it cognitive diversity, getting different viewpoints. There are lots of things here, and I am wondering if there are also ways to start answering certain questions to get different viewpoints. So, for example, quality of life as a queer person of color. Are there ways to get a better understanding of what that's like in these three geographical locations? Asking people, spending some time there. And I think that it's really interesting how we ask for advice, how we ask questions, because what I think we don't really want to do is contaminate the question, contaminate the advice we get by signaling a preference, by saying this is what we're thinking of doing, and just asking, well, tell me a little bit more. What was it like? What is it like as a queer person of color in around? I don't know where exactly University of California, Santa Barbara is in Santa Barbara, California. I don't know the geography of. I think that's near Los Angeles, somewhere. But what is that like? And try to get answers that are rather specific without some type of contamination around your sort of preferences or what the bigger context is, because people do like to be helpful, but sometimes they might be inadvertently unhelpful if you signal a preference. I try to do this. I'm much more aware now. I won't say, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? That's not a great way to solicit a response. Or you say, well, I'm thinking about launching a business, is actually a little bit of a better question than I've launched a business. What do you think? But a better question even is, what do you think about launching a business? So if I ask, well, I'm thinking about moving to Santa Barbara. What do you think? This? Oh yeah, congratulations. So
yeah.
Anyway, it's how we ask is really important.
It's a great point. Great point. And regarding filling the gaps with information, because what we tend to do, it's focus on our specifics. Sort of what you mentioned in the beginning, that we always think that our situation is unique, but even we focus on the details of our situation. That's fine. We should know the details, but what we tend to ignore is, the base rates.
Mm-hmm.
And one way, to get those is what you said, Ben, is you find people who are living, in these cities, and you ask them, okay, what's the feeling like? You try to find some stats or opinions for people who really know, so to get the outside view, to get what happens in general. And then you go back to your details and you think, okay, how might this be different for me, if it is? But at first, there's no, there's no reason that, what happens in general would be different for me. Perhaps there is, you have to see your details, but you should know
great point.
What happens in general.
Yeah.
And, statistics and asking good questions, non-leading questions is a great way to do that.
Really great point. Really great point. So I think maybe we could sum up here some points that Jordan can take away. I think we talked about doing some type of structured, rational process. Weight and rate tool is good, much better than a pros and cons list. I have a focus framework. I'll put that in the show notes that has some questions, and so do that. But also then spend some time thinking about the different questions and your different emotional states, and seeing what that generates. Thinking about what's important, one's values. I think just asking some questions about that. You mentioned base rates. I think what's a really good one is visa for working in the U.S. Just very simple. It's like, how long does it take to get this thing typically? And then what's the market for whatever it is that I might be able to offer in these two geographies? I think is useful question to ask. And I think going back to what you said, congratulations, because these are very these are all great options. So in some ways, it's not to say that you can't go wrong, but I would say it's not that likely that this will turn into any sort of disaster. So I should give one some confidence that these are good options. Although, as you say, I like the hats, haircuts, tattoos thing, which is a heuristic about the size, the importance of the decision. And this feels like a tattoo type of decision. So very good to be well considered about it.
Mm-hmm. Now, can I add another one?
Please.
With the summary that you made, perhaps it's applicable, perhaps not. Combining options or combining combining aspects of different options to come up with a better one. I'm not sure if this is something that would work here, but for example, if one program allows you to work remotely and that would mean satisfying some other criteria, this is like something to consider as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. Great point. Yeah, that's good stuff. So anything else on this one?
There is one other tool that I use when I'm totally confused sometimes, or just to unstuck me, thinking backwards. Mm-hmm. I think we talked about it as well in your podcast, Inversion. So if you think about, the goal is to become a professor. Perhaps you have some universities in mind. So, all right, okay. What do I need to get there? I mean, and that would also help you to gather the information that you need. I mean, the people who work there, where did they graduate from? Who did they work with? Things like that. So thinking backwards also, it helps,
Yeah, I like that.
Some more thinking. Yeah.
I really like this format, by the way, because you spark some things that came up as well, which was thinking about the professional niche and brand as a scientist. I think it's possible to not know on a day-to-day basis what it may be like to work with a specific individual, even though they may be very prestigious in their field. And that may be an interesting question to ask, that on a day-to-day basis, spending 2+ years working on a certain thing, what will that feel like? What will that be like? And it may not be all that one might think. And similarly, there may be another place where maybe the prestige factor, I guess what I'm saying is don't get too blinded by the prestige factor, or ask the question of what does this look like on a day-to-day basis? So a lot of this is about like looking at the same problem from a slightly different lens. So what would it look like and feel like on a day-to-day basis? Going into this university, doing this work with these individuals, And would I enjoy it? Would I get satisfaction out of it? And rather than just to, I think the inversion is really interesting. It's not rather than just zooming out to the end, but just then working backwards. What types of things would I be working on? This sort of thing.
And it sort of circles back to self-awareness, right? Like that knowing your values a little bit and what you expanded on in the beginning.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, we'll wrap up and move on to decision dilemma number 2, if that's okay. And this one comes from Justine. And Justine writes, I work in a large consultancy. I've not been very happy with my job. I've become disillusioned with what we are doing for our clients. I work in organizational development consulting. I have a strong passion for learning and development, but all the project work I've been doing has involved organizational redesign. This is code for laying people off. Lo and behold, my own department is going through a reorg and I've accepted voluntary redundancy. This is daunting. I am quite burned out. And so while I'm scared, the change is very welcome. My partner works and we have 2 small children, can survive for several months based on his job and my severance. But while my partner is very supportive, there's pressure to make sure we're able to keep paying the bills. I want to use this time and explore some options. I'm not sure what to do. This is going to be a big change and I feel like I lack structure to deal with it effectively at this stage. I am thinking about A, getting another role in a smaller consulting firm, B, testing the market for in-house roles. So I presume that means going into a client organization. Although having seen how clients work, I'm not that keen. C, trying to freelance. D, getting a master's degree. This would be at least a big time and financial commitment. How can I best approach this? How do I even get to the point where I have exciting career decisions to make while at the same time contributing to meeting my family's needs? So, initial thoughts on this one?
It's still an exciting place to be, but it's frightening, right? I mean, it's sort of, in this situation, not all options, not all roads lead to a good end. So you want to make the good decision because there's other people depending on you. So, but having said that, this is a heavy decision. Like it's like a combo of different decisions.
There's a lot going on here.
I get this sense. So what do you do when you have like a combo of so many decisions? You try to break it down, right, into more manageable parts because the options, quite different from each other. They could all lead down to, very good, things in the future. But, how do you evaluate each option? I mean, for me, it seems that first of all, it's advisable to get some space to think and decompress because it's a totally new place. And then sort of create a plan to test one option, 2 options simultaneously, or some of the options you like, before you commit to either option. So leave some time and space to start testing and experimenting, like push your way through the options. That would feel much safer rather than jumping into one option, too soon or, without exploring and experimenting. What are your thoughts, Ben?
I like that. Yeah, I really like that. Also, similar to the first one, there's a lot here around framing and values and what's important. And I'm just looking at some of the language here, like survive, daunting, keeping, paying the bills. So I think I agree, spending some time to decompress and to create the space to explore is, I think, would be really valuable here. It sounds to me, but there's this sort of survive and will I become, destitute, all this sort of thing. So here's one thing I would actually recommend in this case is to do a kind of a pre-mortem exercise right at the beginning. So pre-mortem, for those who are unfamiliar, it's just a technique. I talk about it in the cognitive diversity, overcoming certain biases. But I think for me, just because of the language that's sort of here, the concerns is, so thinking about what could go wrong and then trying to work backwards as to how that could have happened. And I think that it doesn't have to be a huge exercise, but I think what that would do is provide a bit of confidence, a bit of like, well, what's the sort of the worst case scenario? What are some of the ways that could arise? And then that, I think, would be a really useful way for Justine to develop measures to protect the downside. And it might be, what are the financial thresholds? What are whatever the thing is that sounds like a lot is sort of financial, and maybe even speaking to a financial advisor would be useful here around how to maybe carve out some budget, this sort of thing. And to me, that would provide almost a bit of a safety net, if you like, or if I absolutely had to go back and find a job, like how would I do it? And you can have these sort of plans kind of in place. And then once you've done that, you kind of not forget about it, but you can have a little bit of confidence that now I'm in a good place to sort of explore and try things. So I would recommend that, just because of a little bit of the language, what's kind of coming across. I might be misreading what's here, but it does feel a bit like there are lots of concerns, and what they would really like to do is be able to explore options and understand what they would most like to do. And they may discover lots of things, but that becomes really difficult if you're thinking about, how will we pay the mortgage in 2 months?
Yeah. And I think that's what you said before about how you talk to people and how you get advice. I think that's really valuable also in this situation, because for Justine to like work through the situation, decompress and start thinking about it, one of the ways is, is to talk to other people. And it's important to do it the right way, instead of asking people, what should I do? It's like, what do you think are the positives and negatives of, doing a master's or, an internal role? It's to trigger thinking and examine it from different, So, yeah.
Yeah. I really like that. And there may be an exercise would be just a list of people to speak to, and around each of these, while starting to even formulate options. I think formulating options requires a lot of creativity, and so I think talking to lots of people, just coming up, just lean into your curiosity and come up with a list of people and just go and talk to them about, well, what's it like working here, or what's it like we're doing a master's here, or studying this, or what would you recommend if you could go back and do it again, knowing what you know now? What would you do differently? These kinds of things. Just get really, really curious, and I think options will emerge that way
through the process, right?
Through the process, yeah.
And I tend to think that this kind of decisions, because it's still it's not well formulated, that definitely would benefit from a walk through the focus framework. Because it's to help spark all the options and the ideas and the information.
Yeah, there may be options on the table that Justine is not aware of, or maybe ignoring, or something along those lines. So I think through through working through some of those questions, and I'll put the link into the show notes to the focus framework, which might be helpful to just get options that will emerge. I do come back to the thing about like what's important values wise for my family, for myself. What do I like? There's something in there about learning and development. Why is that? What do I really value? I think that's also a useful thing to lean into and do a little bit of work around.
Absolutely.
Again, hard to do if you're really worried about the downside. So I think there's something there about just talking to your partner about budgeting, about having a type of a plan, that kind of thing, just to create that space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else on this one?
For me, just to reiterate, because I get the sense and the perspective that, the downside needs to be mitigated as best as possible. And, what you said about starting with a Premortem is, very, very good way to see where, what you need to hedge, and, have a plan, like a time plan in place, because, you have the finances, which, Ben recommended can get a financial advisor to figure things out. Always a good way if you can, you have expert opinion, but, finances are, they last until a certain time. So having a time plan that prevents you from entering that time period where you're stressed, financially stressed, is a good way. Because also when we become financially stressed, we make poorer decisions, and it's more difficult to get out of that loop and, have a healthier mind. So it's better to do that whilst you can.
Yeah, I like that. That's a really good point. Okay, so I think we've outlined a few things, hopefully, that will be helpful to Justine. So protect your downside, speak to a financial advisor, do pre-mortem, have your certain you have a timeline, and then explore, find ways to explore and really lean into your curiosities. I think that makes it exciting as well, right? Like I like the idea of just, I'm gonna just ask some questions. I'm gonna find out some things, and that's a great way to learn things. This is an opportunity when you're working full time. You don't have that. So I think that's valuable, and so it makes it quite a positive, right? The other one was she did mention that, I'm presuming that they're burned out. So I think also just taking some time at the beginning to deal, just recover, rest, or making sure that one carves out time to do that is pretty important. We also don't make great decisions when we're tired and just we don't think very clearly. Good. Okay. Shall we move on to number 3, the third and the last one?
Yes.
You want to read this one out?
Sure. It was anonymous, so let's call them Mark.
Okay.
All right. So I am the managing director of the local branch of an international company. A close friend recently asked me to help out. They had been going through a rough patch with a death in the family, some financial troubles, and they want help. As it happens, there's an opening for a back office role at my company. Training is offered, so there are no strict prerequisites for the position. But knowing my friend, I'm not sure how well they will fit into the role. I am conflicted between my desire to help and my intuition that this will not work out and it will leave me exposed to my bosses at headquarters. Right. I underline the word conflicted. I think that's a pretty
crucial word.
Clear dilemma. Yeah.
What are your initial thoughts on this one? Yeah, no, please. I'm
all right.
Curious what you think initially.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I mean, I like to point out first to myself and then everyone else that it's okay to have conflicting values, right? I mean, it's a thing that it's completely normal, completely okay, even if they're, two values feel so strong, they are so important to us, but they are conflicted, it's still okay. So, because they are like Susan David says, values are like the rooms in a house. You cannot be in two rooms at once. And so the question is, okay, how do you trade off? How do you stay true to yourself without sacrificing any of your values? So the way that I would think about this, trying to put some structure into this is, I create 3 scenarios, the very simple, popular approach. So first scenario, Ben, is that, everything goes well. This friend likes the role. They're doing great. Company is productive. Excellent. So there's, you don't need to worry about that scenario. But then there's 2 other scenarios. There's a worst case scenario. They find the work challenging. They are not performing well. It affects team dynamics, productivity, and then they quit, or even worse, they don't quit. So it's the worst case. And you always have the middle case scenario, which, they're doing average. It affects the productivity, but not too much. For me, both the worst case and the middle case scenarios are scenarios that you have to deal with because you're the managing director and, you have responsibility. And so because it's part of the value, to, lead the company well, you have to deal with both. Okay, what do you do in case these scenarios come up? So in case you hire this person and these 2 scenarios come up, what you can do is that you set tripwires. The classic plan, performance benchmarks that are independent from you. The managing director is not the person to judge this. They are somewhat objective or, evaluated by others. And, down the road, this person should expect to be evaluated along, for this position. So if you decide to hire this person, this is, how you hedge against the possibility that it backfires on you. And at the same time, to increase the probabilities of the best case scenario, you provide training and support as needed, and something that, that should be done anyway. But at the same time, while thinking about these 3 scenarios, in the case that you hire this person, I wanted to take a step back and widen the frame a little bit. Because if the goal here is to help out a friend, maybe there are other ways that we can help them, right? I mean, even if they suggest that we hire them into this company because we can and because, it's okay. I mean, they have a chance of doing well. That's one way, but there's also other ways to help out, like network, refer to someone else, or So it's not always, we don't have to go down that obvious road. We can take a step back.
Oh, great point. Great point.
What do you think?
Yeah, so a bunch of thoughts. But I really like that last one because we and I talk about this, and it actually didn't even come up when I was considering this. Is that this is there's an either or framing here. And when I talk about options, it's, well, either or. We want to get away from either or thinking and think about other ways to achieve the same thing, and what's not on the table. So when you said that, I immediately thought, oh wow, there could be some interesting work to do there. So that was that's a really good point to take a step back. One of the things that also struck me, and what was interesting, is they make the point about intuition. My intuition is that this isn't going to work out. Knowing the job, knowing the friend, I thought that's really interesting. And my mind immediately thought, is that really true? And when we think about intuition, there are conditions in which it works, and there are conditions in which it doesn't work. And context is really important. So we know our friend from our relationship with them in a certain context. We probably don't know that much about them from a professional context. And we don't know maybe how they might work. And similarly, we're thinking about the role and what we know professionally, and maybe vice versa. They may not they may not know how these two things combine, and are when we make decisions based on intuition, the environment and the experience is really important to consider. So it's just a long way of saying that you may not know how this will work out. This may work out better than you assume. So that was one of my initial thoughts looking at this. And so I do think one of the options ought to be to see how this person fares in, say, an interview process. The other thing was, this person is a managing director, so I think that creates some dilemmas internally. But it's a back office role, so I presume that this managing director isn't the one who's making the hiring decision for a back office role. I don't know. I presume it's somebody else, but I'm not sure. If there's an open competition,
the way I read, they have influence.
That's right. Yeah, that's how I read it.
To hire that person because of the role. Yeah, but that's you're right. It could be a more bigger process. Yeah.
Yeah. What becomes really important here is, and also companies have got all types of policies about hiring and conflicts of interest and things. And so if it's an international company, they will have that. So one has to be careful about violating a policy. But that thing could be incorporated into the process. So in other words, I think one way and one option perhaps that could be on the table is the influence might be useful to maybe help them get an interview or consider the process. I don't know. I don't know what the lines are there, but that the decision ought to be probably made by the hiring manager, and there are probably ways of setting it up so that you're not unduly influencing the process. Let the hiring manager make that decision, but also leave it open, right? Leave it open to, this, they might perform well. You may not, there may be some things about your friend that we don't know lots of things about the people with whom we have friendships. And so because your intuition says it may not work out, that also may not be true. So set it up so that you give that person a chance, and you don't overly influence the hiring decision, and you see what happens. I think you have to also be clear about this with your friends around what you can and can't do. There may be some expectations that I don't know, but there may be some expectations, and I'm bringing in some of my own experience into this, that some countries have different hiring practices than others. So there may be an expectation that, I can just snap my fingers and get my friend a job. In most international companies, that's not how it works. And so there may be some expectation management. And then I do like the idea of what are some of the other ways we can help our friend here?
Yeah. I like your point about intuition, and that, because you know someone personally, it doesn't matter, you know them professionally, and I can really relate to that, actually. And it hadn't occurred to me when I was reading this example. That's a very good point. And regarding the whole, because there's an ethics issue here, right? Like, I mean, whether it's called nepotism or whatever. And it really depends on, the culture, what is acceptable there or not. But of course, if you take a black or white, view, it's not a practice that, should be supported, but, bringing it down to the local culture level, it may be different. But for, in any case, because I mean, we see all these examples of scandals coming out, and most of them, or the way that I perceive them, it's things that used to be okay, accepted by society up to a point, and from that point onward, it becomes a scandal. So you see, like, the evolution of norms, and, how we, become more fair, more just, and things start becoming, a scandal. So this is always an issue when there's any ethics involved. So for me, it's important to, do what we tend to procrastinate and leave for later, like be transparent. So you can say that, okay, I know this person, if they go through like a mini interview, as opposed to, if there's any hiring involved, but be transparent with the bosses. I know this person, they fill the criteria. If they don't, it becomes a different decision dilemma. But they fill the criteria, we'll hire them for a probationary period. So, but be transparent instead of trying to hide it and trying to, and that's one of the things that we don't do so well. I think we leave it. I mean, we're going to discuss about it, in 1 year or later or never.
Yeah.
But it's important.
That's a great point. In companies with a healthy culture, I would say that's something that you ought to be able to do, just to ask someone about how to approach this that would meet the needs of that wouldn't cross any ethical boundaries, meet the needs of the company in the moment. These kinds of things. That there ought to be a way of getting some internal guidance around that, especially if it's an international company. There should be something there that would be able to help this person.
Exactly. And, because at the end of the day, relationships are built on trust, whether they are personal or professional. And it's, I think what makes the situation tricky is that you have to set boundaries, but also like explain your moves and your, to everyone at the same time. So it exposes a person. But that's what it means, I think, to have conflicting values. And it's something, instead of ignoring one value or another, it's much more satisfying for ourselves to go down the hard road and try to embrace both in some way that doesn't break the rules or, our ethics.
Yeah, it's a challenging one. But I think there are some things that this person could look at doing, and find ways to work through it in a way that satisfies, that helps their friend and satisfies their own personal values, as well as their own the values of their organization, and their own. There's possibly some management of risk on their part as well, around not violating some type of policy or standard. They also not be exposed at the boss's headquarters, which is, that's an interesting, be exposed, I think, is an interesting choice of language. And so what you're saying is, well, let's lean into this before, something gets discovered that I didn't know, or we have an awkward conversation in a year's time. I imagine that would be part of one of your scenarios here. An awkward conversation in a year's time, and what would that look like and feel like? And hopefully that would come through through that process. I think that's useful.
Mm. Yeah. If everything goes well, maybe there won't be an awkward conversation. But as we know very well, it's not. There's always the outcome, but it doesn't. To get a good outcome, to increase the chances of getting a good outcome, you have to have a good process.
Yes.
Create the ground for a good outcome. It won't be guaranteed, but increases the chances. Yeah.
Yeah. I like it. Anything else on this one?
I don't think I can get more into it from the information that we have, but I think, if I were to briefly mention the points, let me know if I forget anything. First, it's don't let your intuition mislead you. Keep an open mind. Widen the problem. Maybe it's not about giving this person this particular job, who could help in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
If you decide to go down the road of helping them, you should think about the three possible scenarios and take action in advance to hedge against the mediocre and the worst case scenarios, both for that person and for yourself.
Yeah, I like it. That's great. And you also mentioned about being transparent as well internally, which and just taking a step back as well, looking at all three of these. I think when we spoke on my podcast, you mentioned something that I think is really important, and I mentioned it in a LinkedIn post the other day, was the importance of having something like a decision journal. And this is all about process over outcome. We can't guarantee that anything that we do leads to the right outcome. The only thing that's within our control is how we decide. And it's really difficult to figure out when we make a decision, what was our state of mind? What were we thinking? What options did we discount? So it's really good to write that down and be able to go back and then have a look. And then if something has actually changed, we can say, oh, maybe we should revisit this. Or if nothing's changed, we can just say, well, okay, let's continue going forward along the path that we chose. I think it's just a very valuable practice. And that I would also leave with listeners. Don't just do this stuff, but actually write it down and have a place where you're keeping tabs on this stuff.
And for anyone who has tried any sort of journaling, they get it, I think, because even there's many different types. I think you can do it once there. You can do it whenever you feel stressed or emotional. You just write things. You dump it on the paper, and then you feel you have a clearer mind. Or sometimes they do it to figure out what they're actually thinking, like freestyle writing, and then they're reading oh, was I thinking about that? But writing it down helps. And what we are saying here is, if you write down there are templates that you can follow to write down your decision and how you're thinking about it. It's not long. It's just you lay down your thoughts. It also helps you in the moment to acknowledge what you're doing, what you're thinking. it also helps for later, of course, to come back and revisit. But journaling is really powerful, and it can be for you, or it can be in a form that is, a decision that is registered, a process that is registered at an organizational level. I mean, you won't call it decision journal at that point, but it's like keeping track of the decisions and why we took them.
I often think about this at an organizational level, and I do wonder why more organizations don't do this. There's all types of data and so forth that organizations collect and track and monitor, but it's very difficult to actually go back and say, well, who decided this and when and how? And I think that would cut through a lot of the organizational problems as well, just being able to keep the organizational equivalent of a decision journal.
Yeah, and accountable, and exactly.
Yeah. This is really great. I enjoyed doing this. I think that we ought to do it again. But what did you think? What did you take away from this?
I really enjoyed it as well. I learned from you. I took a couple of notes because that was interesting because, you give some thought to a problem, but it's just one person. It's so much more valuable when you have like different perspectives. It's like coming back to the same problem time after time, or doing it like from different people. And so thank you, Ben. It was a great being here
thank you.
Doing this with you.
Likewise, I learn a lot from you. So this was great. I really like the idea of like batting a problem back and forth and looking at it from different angles. So many times when you were talking, and I was like, oh yeah, this has raised this point, and it's really, really fabulous. Also to mention that, these are, going back to this point about meta skills, that these are ways of thinking about problems, decisions, and finding different angles, different lenses. And when there's a sort of richness of questions, tools, frameworks, and things, that's the value. There's no one tool or thing. We mentioned lots of them, actually, from scenarios to Premortem to weight and rate. But there's no one tool that has the answer. And so it's how we think about our decisions and the different lenses that we use is the value.
At the same time, we can all learn about these tools, right? Yeah. I mean, we can all learn, and it's a pity in a sense that it's not like in part of the, early education that we have, or something that we see around, so, frequently, so that we can absorb it, but we can still learn these tools, and it's about practice, as you said, also in the beginning.
Yeah.
Doing it again and again.
Yeah. We can learn about the tools, and we can learn when to use those tools and how to frame them and everything. And I've never formally received any decision-making education when I was growing up, or even in university and even in graduate school. I don't know about you. Was that a similar experience?
Yes, for me as well. The first glimpse I got into it was when I did an applied intelligence certificate at Mercyhurst University, and we had some professors there that, one worked for the FBI, so they were, their business is this, solid decision making, practical, applicable. That was the first time I started learning about these tools. And I realized that, yes, I had learned about other tools before in school, like expected utility, probabilities, but they were never put in such a way as to why are they useful for me in everyday life? Why should I know, how to do fractions, and calculate probabilities of different events happening together or at different times, and independent events. because, they all come down to, making you a better thinker, better decision maker. But, it's part of it is because the things I think we learn are not really linked to the degree that they should be linked to everyday decisions. And, secondly, the tools and the progress that we've had in terms of prescriptive decision making, it's quite recent. So the tools are modern, and the people who use them are not people that we see around us in everyday life. I mean, they're the more, life or death situations, like bigger organizations, or they're not so, all around us. So that was my experience. So I'm really excited to share these tools and talk about them. And
fabulous. Well, we are actually going to be doing that. The both of us, on the next iteration of the Decision Navigators course, which there'll be a link in the show notes. But on December the 5th and the 12th, we'll be running the Decision Navigators course, and this time it's myself and Melina will be running the course jointly. And if anyone is listening to this and is interested in learning a little bit more about how to apply these tools to different contexts, then join us, because we're going to get it right into it. And I think it's really, really valuable stuff. I use these things in my day-to-day life. It's very, very helpful. I know you do as well. And so if you're curious about that, please join us. We'd love to be able to share this with you.
And just to add, because I'm really excited about this course, it's framed around the framework focus that it's Ben's framework. And it's really important to have, a person teach you something that they've built it themselves. And of course, it combines a lot of tools and a lot of ideas, but it's modern, it's applicable, it comes from like real world experience. And it's, I'm really excited to be part of this course.
Oh, thank you. This is good. I'm excited that you're part of this. This makes it so much better and so much richer. And as you say, it's a framework, but it's a way of grouping this stuff. And sometimes it's just all that we really need is a way of pulling lots of stuff together into something that is just applicable both in the here and now, and just prompts us to think a little bit more effectively. And so the course is organized around that, but the stuff that we talked about will feature one way or the other. And the other thing that we're going to be doing is inviting people to bring their own decision dilemmas into this, so that we get right into the practical applicability of this stuff. So you go away with a better way of looking at the decision you might have, or the types of decisions that you might have, or the types of decisions you will have in the future. So this is not a theoretical course. This is a practical course.
Yeah.
Melina, thank you so much for this. This is a lot of fun, and I'm sure we're going to be doing this again in the future, but really enjoyed this.
Me too, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, and hope you all enjoyed that, and not just enjoyed it, but got something valuable out of it. So thank you for listening, and happy and healthy decision making, everyone.